is the most amazing place in the solar system. It's an extraordinary oasis near an insignificant star, our sun, in an arm of a galaxy we call the Milky Way. And our galaxy is one of a billion galaxies floating in a deep space we call the universe. Aligned at a proper distance from the sun and a tilted axis, elements on Earth are perfectly fit to create the conditions necessary for life. Doesn't it make you wonder? Could there be any other planet like this with wonders just as incredible? In the early stages of its life, over a course of millions of years, Earth was a fiery inferno, which today would make you think, how could life exist here? This is Earth, 4.4 billion years ago, a toxic world with no hope of life. Then, about 3.5 billion years ago, life on Earth was ready to begin, when the planet slowly evolved into the blue marble that we know today. Life's earliest stepping stones were small and fragile. These microbiological creatures were where the wonders of this furred rock from the sun began. Animals such as dinosaurs, mammals, and us can all trace origins back to this period where life began on Earth. And only in a few billion years, the most spectacular form of life began. Plants. With a weak oxygen-rich atmosphere and high levels of carbon dioxide, it's easy to figure out how plants were able to get a foothold on terra firma. And as they evolved, just as other life forms, they grew to impressive sizes. And with nothing to cut them down, they spread all over the world. Well, almost nothing. These large animals are called diplodocus. They are, you might say, the first lumberjacks. But these animals did not cut down these trees for wood. It would be another 150 million years before humans evolved and found this sparse landscape of giant redwoods. We are now traveling back to our own time. Today, the sounds of the forest are no longer those of giant lizards or mammoth creatures. Instead, we hear a faint call, heralding the sound of an approaching thunder. In the early days of the American West, we built an incredible machine that would further the expansion of the country we have today. A machine that's lifespan can stretch its early non-cared beginnings to the 1st century AD, when a great scientist invented a contraption that couldn't have been any better for its time. The steam locomotive. You are looking at the very first steam locomotive. In the 1st century AD, the Greek scholar Hero of Alexandria invented steam jet propulsion, using a device, the device we see now, the Aeolipile. And just like life's evolutionary journey, it evolved into amazing forms to build the world we have today. When they roamed the country, these iron horses delivered the stampede and acceleration of thunder under heaven. The area of railroading we are interested in is logging railroads, and in the US there can be at least several different places to see that. These mighty iron horses may have been the same thing Native Americans saw when the pioneers came in to settle on the new land. Although all these images depict logging railroad locomotives and logging railroads, the railroad we are interested in is in one famous state. The Roaring Camp and Big Trees Railroad is located in California, north of Monterey Bay, near the town of Felton. This little railroad is tiny but mighty. Indeed, it has a large collection of logging railroad equipment, including a 1910 and 1912 Shay locomotives. It also has a fully functional steam saw. This railroad doesn't run just one particular line, but 2 branch lines. Roaring Camp runs both branch lines, the Santa Cruz, Big Trees, and Pacific Railway, and the logging railroad Glory Railway, the Roaring Camp and Big Trees Narrow Gauge Railroad. Whether you travel on steam or diesel, you travel through dense redwood groves, some of the oldest trees on Earth. These trains may be different, in some ways yes, but they both have a similar echo through the forest that reminds us of what the pioneers would have sang long ago, searching for a new land to call home.
railroad starts at a 6-mile round trip from the depot located at Roaring Camp. Soon after departure, we cross the 200-foot-long Union Creek Bridge, which is also the sharpest turn of any railroad on the West Coast. At the switchback, you will be able to experience the raw power and spectacle of a train battling an 8.5% grade. Once we cross the switchback, we continue our climb through dense redwood, stopping at the top of Bear Mountain to take a break off the train, or to stand at the Cathedral Grove with big trees. We have climbed over 500 feet up the side of Bear Mountain. As we return to the depot, we see the authentic 1800s sawmill operation. Boarding the train is a magical feeling. It is indeed taking a step back in time. And that's because, these are real steam engines that once hauled huge lumps of timber on skeleton log cars to help establish small community towns. Towns that looked very much like the town here at Roaring Camp. Finally, with everyone on board, the train is ready to go. Now just imagine what it would have been like back in the 1800s. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and listen to the sounds of a real logging railroad steam locomotive. Shay locomotives were very common geared locomotives in the beginning of logging railroads, with their geared drive shaft and offset boiler that cannot be mistaken for any other locomotive. Although their speed is not impressive, these thunderously powerful locomotives were built ideal for rough track work and steep grades typical of logging railroads, just like Roaring Camp.
She measures 6, 7, 8, 900 year-old trees, and mixed in between them are the grandmothers, the ones that are over. Train is just passing between two great ladies right here that are 2,100 years old apiece. And this great forest starts about 9 miles south of us, the other side of the mountain.
Passengers who want to know more about what they're seeing can resort to the train's PA system. The conductor, Kenton Jeffries, who has spent much of his time on this line.
Miles long, but no longer than 8 or 10 miles at any one location. Which means ladies love that Pacific Coast air. Very well for that.
Shays were not alone. As the age of logging railroads progressed, Ephraim Shay, the man who designed this geared locomotive, started sharing his ideas with other inventors. And so too were locomotives such as the Heisler, Malton, and Climax locomotives were designed and built. Roaring Camp Railroads is famous for owning at least one or two of each of these locomotives. Although some are not yet operational, Roaring Camp has a wide selection of locomotives. Its Heisler number 2 was once used for the West Side Lumber Co. and is still the oldest operating Heisler locomotive in the world. Shay number 7 Sonora also worked for the West Side Lumber Co. and has become a role model for its particular brand of locomotives, the Shays. Pride and joy of Roaring Camp's fleet is Shay number 1, the Dixiana. She is a 2-truck 42-ton Shay built by Lima Locomotive Works in Ohio, just as all Shays were. She previously served on several other railroads, including the Smoky Mountain Railway. Dixie has also entered her 101st year. She turned to a century-year-old locomotive just a year before this one was made, in 2012. These logging engines were designed for their great tractive power and flexibility. Two of these locomotives were the Shay and the Heisler, the most commonly used locomotives of any logging railroad. The Heisler uses a pair of inclined cylinders to stroke a crankshaft centered beneath the boiler. One axle on each power truck is driven from the crankshaft and gears, and connecting rods pass the motion along to the other axles. The Shay features 3 upright cylinders placed to the right of the boiler. Driving rods turn a crankshaft running the length of the locomotive through universal joints and baffle gears, transmitting power to the wheels of 2 or more swiveling trucks. The train is approaching Indian Creek Trestle, one of the most spectacular spots on the line. This particular bridge marks the sharpest turn of any railroad on the west coast. To pass this bridge, these trains literally do have to corner a dime.
Hey, good photo opportunity, left-hand side. Get those cameras up there. Number 7's turning right in front of you on the left-hand side. There's a great broadside shot right there. Get it.
Look at that, we're on a trestle. Look at those screens.
But what is that to a Shay locomotive? It was built for this.
Side, get those cameras up there. Number 7's turning right in front of you on the left-hand side. There's a great broadside shot right there. Get it.
Look at that, we're on a trestle. Look at those screens. There.
After passing Indian Creek, the train really does start to unravel itself in a perfect plane position. As the conductor puts it, the train is at least 2 or 3 stories higher than the last car on the train. We are heading for Deer Valley, which marks that point. Whatever the reason for that obvious name, many species of black-tailed deer come over to this area when the sound of a coming train is not here to frighten them. This redwood tree is called the Linden Tree, and you can see why it's obviously called that. But these two are sister trees. They both grew out of the same place in the ground, and were both joined at the base section of the tree. Over a course of 100 years, the ground that it sits on shifts, and the railroad tracks do have to be moved back a few inches. Although most of the trees around seem very tall, it's mainly due to where they are planted. Even though the railroad is called Roaring Camp and Big Trees, big trees are really at the top of the hill. There's far more railroad ahead.
The switchback section of Roaring Camp and Big Trees Railroad, called Hallelujah Junction, is the ideal place to send out the locomotives. The 8 1/2% grade has the locomotives working hard at this point. Sending out the locomotive is done when the fireman empties a small can of sand into the firebox. The sand being sucked up through the heat tubes cleans the soot from the tubes, allowing the tubes to conductate better.
And as the train backs up Hallelujah Junction, the black sooty sand falls away from the passengers. Switchbacks were a common use in logging and many other forms of railroads that could not be capable of making their trains go around the mountain
or battle a steep grade. As the train stops at the bottom at one track, it then switches to another track and backs up, giving passengers on the rear platform a front-end view. Going forward again, the train has climbed 500 vertical feet above sea level up the side of the hill.
Alright, boys and girls, keep an eye out for that banana slug. It's right in here somewhere. We saw that right yesterday. Now, they don't move too fast. Keep an eye out.
As the train approaches Bear Mountain, the train will stop and rest here for several minutes, giving passengers the time to get off the train and explore the surrounding redwoods. The most remarkable place up here is this beautiful ring of trees. The age of the redwoods here is 600 to 700 years old. They are about 250 feet in height. Passengers up here can also explore the train itself. Inside the cab, you literally feel the heat emanating from the boiler of this locomotive. The gauges and levers on the left are all used to maintain the boiler temperature at 190 psi, or 383 degrees. On the right of the locomotive's cab, you can see where the engineer sits. This is where every man wants to sit on a train. Using all these valves, steam pressure is added or removed to stop or speed up the train. Once everyone has had a rest, they can either decide to hop back on board or stay and wait for a later train. With the train given a highball, it's full throttle forward. Roaring Camp Railroads did once have a second trestle on the line. As you make your way back down the mountain, passengers on the right side of the train can see the remains of the old corkscrew trestle. This train does have to reverse to get down the switchback. To perform this task, the locomotive and the train itself are equipped with sanding and air brake systems to keep the train at a safe speed as it comes down the mountain. Sanding the rails is pretty much adding a rough surface to the tracks in order to prevent surface tension and cause the train to slip off the rails. On special days, passengers get to see another train negotiate the switchback while their train is shunted on the siding. Shunting is a term used in railroading, which allows another train to pass while one sits idle on a sidetrack. Roaring Camp has hit its ups and downs in the years since its opening, including derailments and uncoupled couplers. But in all these cases, the railroad has gone through them all without any major accident.
Number 7 up there ahead of us. She's going to be making a very sharp left-hand turn. Where she makes that left-hand turn, all right, you guys look to the right.
Upside down, the engine turned, and Georgie's breast it smashed. His head against the firebox door, flames were rolling high. I'm glad I was born for an engineer on the C&O road to die. The doctor said to Georgie, my darling boy, be still. Your life may yet be saved if it is God's blessed will. Oh no, said George, that will not do. I want to die so free. I want to die for the engine I love, 143.
Roaring Camp was envisioned by founder F. Norman Clark. The forest and the logging railroads concept was an interesting passion to him. Because he was an extreme visionary, he saw that as time passed, logging communities disappeared as technology became more advanced. Norman's dream was to freeze this period and all the elements that were involved in with it at that time period for future generations to see. Heading back to Roaring Camp, passengers get another chance to capture a shot of the locomotive crossing Indian Creek. Curves on this railroad are incredibly sharp. One curve in particular measures 75 feet radius. This is very common on a logging railroad. In the grades, this particular railroad at its peak has a 9-foot grade, which is foreign to most railroads, but here at Roaring Camp, they do it every day. As the train comes down the mountain, passengers get another surprise from the locomotive. This is called a blowdown. A blowdown is a process where they use steam pressure to blast mineral deposits from the bottom of the water tank. They do it about once every hour. While the fireman blows down the boiler, the engineer stops the train for a minute so the conductor can throw the track switch for the next train. The train moves on to the depot to drop off its passengers and pick up its next train. Roaring Camp operates trains daily all year round, but at different times per day, depending on the month or the time of the year. As passengers depart from the train, they can take a look at the town's general store, which offers products with a railroad-related theme. They can also get a meal over at the Red Caboose Cafe, look at the steam train and talk with its crew, or get information about upcoming events. Or most importantly, see a real working sawmill. The historic steam sawmill located near the depot is a fascinating feature for visitors at Roaring Camp. The sawmill uses a small steam engine known as a donkey engine. It operates with the same steam cylinder technology as locomotives to power the huge saw blade as it saws through the massive redwood timbers. Their small size and portability was essential for loggers to mill effectively in remote forests. Steam sawmills like this one at Roaring Camp were once located all along the Pacific and East Coast forests, coupled to narrow-gauge steam railroads, provided the efficiency to make turn-of-the-century logging a profitable venture.
These particular vehicles are referred to as speeders. They had a number of uses in logging railroads. They were inspection engines. They were used to ferry the work crews and trackings up and down the mountains, which would also help the railroad reserve their steam power for heavy freight services. And that is very similar to what they do at Roaring Camp when they don't have a lot of passengers. They use switches like number 40 or the Milwaukee to carry a low amount of passengers to save the steam engines for services when they have enough passengers. Another important use these diesels are used for is to give the steam engines a tug on the back of the train, and there's too many passengers for the steam engine to handle up the hill. Passengers may also get a chance to see the other half of the railroad's operations, the Santa Cruz, Big Trees, and Pacific. Santa Cruz, Big Trees, and Pacific, or as it is often called, the Beach Train, runs through one of the oldest railroad lines in California, taking passengers from the depot at Roaring Camp, through Henry Cow Redwood State Park, past the San Lorenzo River Gorge, across a 1909 steel trestle bridge, and through an 1875 tunnel, before arriving at the famous 1912 Santa Cruz Beach Boardwalk. The railroad tracks here are different from the narrow gauge tracks of the steam trains. They are called standard gauge tracks, which are spaced out at 4 feet and 11 inches, relative to the 3 feet spaced narrow gauge tracks. This means that the diesels are bigger than the steam trains. Operating on this line are 2 CF7 locomotives, which Roaring Camp bought from the Santa Fe Railroad. Relative to the steam trains, this line mainly runs during the summer months. In addition to regular train rides, Roaring Camp offers 21 different cultural and recreational events at different times of the year. And this year, it is also celebrating its 50th anniversary. Some of the favorite events at Roaring Camp are a Moonlight Dinner Steam Train, the Holiday Lights Train, Civil War Reenactment Days, and a Day Out with Thomas. In addition to these historical events, visitors at Roaring Camp can learn about the history of the railroad itself. Take the 1976 fire, for example. When the switchback was put in, founder F. Norman Clark decided to use the logs from that fire, and the trees that were cut down were brought to the sawmill to build the tea photo shops that are now an addition to the railroad's town.
silly things we put ourselves through, missing magic each day and not seeing the wonder. That's how the moon must feel. I know how the moon must feel when he makes someone happy. That's the feeling I will feel when you smile at me. I'll be floating on air, I'll be beaming with wonder. That's how the moon must feel. I'm sure he knows if there is more to life. Wish I could be him for a while. I know how the moon must feel, and I can't say I blame him, smiling at the silly things we put ourselves through, never taking the time, always running in circles. That's how the moon must feel. Every now and then there appears a sign that points just round the bend to a place you will find, covered in clover. The magic comes over you, showing up right on time. This is your shining time, climbing through stars to your own glad night.
those who love to ride steam trains, each trip is a journey into the past. And diesel lovers are the explorers and railroading of the future. Here at Roaring Camp, it is where two worlds collide, where the past meets the present. But Roaring Camp Railroads has no monopoly on railroading. There are many other grand adventures in the living history of travel by train, and they're out there waiting for you to explore and find the many other railroads that offer the thunder under heaven.